Hello, welcome to Dancewise, releasing trauma through movement and expressive arts. Today, I'm going to be talking to Emma Roberts, who lives in Devon in the UK. Emma has a website called Shaping the Invisible, embodied presence, listening to your body's wisdom. She writes, "The body is the perfect home in which to return and remember our true nature. It stores all our experiences and shapes the way we move throughout life. The body is imprinted with stories we remember and those forgotten from our ancestors. There is a powerful medicine when we begin to move with awareness and attention. The incredible intelligence that is the body already knows how to heal. It has its own rhythmical nature, a self-regulating process. Dancing is a medicine that awakens what is deeply known in our very cells." Morning, Emma.
Good morning.
Welcome to Dancewise. And we're going to talk about your work as I looked at your website, Shaping the Invisible, where spirit meets the bone.
Yeah.
And when I looked on your website, that's the bit which really spoke to me. I thought, oh, I really would like to talk to you because that just resonates so strongly. So before we get to there, though, perhaps you would like to share with us what exactly you do and how you got to that
I
point.
think I'm going to start with like where my relationship to movement and embodiment, and where from when I can remember, it was where I felt really, really free. And most importantly, I think it's where I could express how I was experiencing life in a really full way. It was a very joyous and continues to be a very joyous place for me, is to, that intimate world within ourselves, but within myself, I could somehow express it in a form that isn't words, isn't language. It's more full, it has more energy, it has more nuance in it, and life that's connected to a bigger life, spirit, whatever people like to call it. To talk about it is very difficult, but actually to move it, to breathe it, to play inside of that is a really, really wonderful unfolding experience. So that I feel like since I can remember, I've always danced. To do this movement and drama therapy training at the Central School of Speech and Drama, which was a 1 year full-time training, so 5 days a week. And that led me after that, so I qualified as a movement drama therapist, and after that sort of worked in different kind of settings. So I worked in an acute psychiatric hospital. So this is when I was 29 years old, so very young, thinking I knew quite a lot, but was pretty, I was enthusiastic, and it was a bit of a learning ground, being in a psychiatric hospital, trying to use creative material as a way to...
Where was that? In Sussex?
That was in London. I was still living in London then. And I was also working in an adults supported housing with autism and Asperger's. And so I was using movement drama therapy again as a therapeutic approach for support and yeah, therapeutic support.
So how would that those sort of sessions work in that with the psychiatric?
Yeah, so they were very different in both places actually. So in the psychiatric, it was an acute hospital, so that this meant they weren't continuation groups. They were people that had been they've had a psychotic episode of some kind, and they're going into hospital for a short period of time, normally to get them stable on some kind of medication until they can go back into their life. So they were group sessions, and I never knew who was in the session. So I would prepare my material, but I I didn't know how that material and how it was going to work. And in one session I might have someone who was very, very high and super enthusiastic, so whatever you put forward they did it like 200%, to someone who was like as low, hard to get anything out of them. So you were sort of seeing both ends of the spectrum, and then everything in between. And like I said, I was very young, I was 29, enthusiastic, trying to use creative material to work as as a healing tool. And I learnt loads. In my naivety. And that was in the psychiatric hospital. And then with the adults with Asperger's and autism, I was doing generally one-to-one sessions, and very, very different client group, because that was, in a way, I was building the same session. Each session would almost be very similar, because it needed to be grounded in something that felt familiar and structured and routined. So I was working in these two very different client groups, where with the psychiatric hospital, I had no idea what was going to happen, what was going to unfold. I really had to be on my toes to respond to so much diversity and difference and not know what the outcome. And then with the other group, it's really like they did not like spontaneity. You had to introduce every idea, and then it became almost part of the structure for the next session. So yeah, it's a very different needs.
I think that's really interesting, because the dance, what Stefan Friedman is recently thinking of, the Dancewise approach for this project is like three petals on say a clover leaf, and there's different needs. So one would be like ceremonial dance in the form of, say, circle dance, that kind of thing. And the intuitive dance, which is what you offer for people who respond more to free expression. And then there's the somatic experiencing type of processes. So as you're saying, in those environments, you had to learn at a young age which approach suited different types of people. And then
and also they're client-centered, if that makes sense. And I think that, I would say, at the heart of, I look at, if I examine my journey through kind of embodiment, is it has to be kind of client led. For myself, my body is trying to understand the information that's in front of me, but within my body, if that makes sense, and then adapting and using what tools I have to support that to my best, and sometimes getting it wrong, and you learn a lot from actually not quite getting it right. You learn a lot because you're only interpreting what you're seeing, in terms of when you're watching information in front of you. I have to own that a lot of what I see that's a lot of interpreting, and sometimes you can get that, you're near to that, and sometimes you can't fall into assumptions. And more so, I think, as the years have gone on, I ask questions rather than assume I understand what's in front of me, but I can share what's happening inside of me as a reference to connect, or to say I'm sensing this, and then putting that as a question to what's in front. Because I think there is this symbiotic relationship happening all the time, everywhere, and I guess really good communication is when we get more clear or understood in that symbiotic relationship. I've kind of gone off a little bit there, but
no, I think what you're also highlighting is what I'm hearing is that your way of processing the information from the external is very much an embodied response.
Yeah.
And so you can feel what's in front of you, what the environment is feeding into you, and you can respond to that. Whereas other people's primary emphasis might be more mental or intellectual, and they'd be picking up perhaps what's happening on the mental sphere much more than the embodied sphere. And neither is right or wrong, but it's when you get one processing in one manner and another person processing in a different, that's when the discord or the misinformation.
Yeah, I would say that though we all originate more from the embodied. I think we're all hardwired actually, and so a lot of what I think I try to offer in the work I do is a little bit of a returning to something that is actually it's integral to every human being. Work that I do is to reawaken a sort of embodied intelligence that is there right from when we're even in the womb, you know, we're in the becoming a human being, coming into form, and then all those natural impulses and instincts we have when we're a baby. And if you ever watch a baby, all the natural kind of movements that happen from the body, and this pull and drive to crawl, and then come to standing, to walking, to running, and all of those things are. It's in sort of every human being, those natural impulses, and then I think depending how we grow up and the culture and what's accepted, what's not accepted, maybe parts of us sort of kind of lose that intelligence being there as part of your everyday experience. And also how we're celebrated. And I think in some culture, intellectual capacity or that form of intelligence is superior to other forms of intelligence, which is more somatic based or kinesthetic based. Unless you're an athlete, and that's another form of celebration, I guess. Sports and stuff.
It's like, particularly since the Victorians, you know, when it was the pinnacle of the mental realm, you know, and all the incredible achievements the Victorians made. But it's also a time when it was really, you know, we went into our intellects a lot more in the West. And that separation happened in the mind and the body. Because I mean, I think even there's a lot of words which are often used now, and embodiment is one of the ones which seems to be used a lot. But you ask somebody what that is, and you know, it's embodied practice or something. Well, what actually do you mean? And everybody will often say something different. So to you, what is that for people in your understanding and in your experience? What is embodiment?
Well, I think the most important element of that is actually when we're speaking about embodiment, that within ourself we are present to the felt sense experience as it's happening. So, you know, if I'm talking now, that I have a sense of my feet and my legs in space, and maybe I have an awareness that I've got a little bit of nervousness in my belly because this is a kind of odd situation. I can feel my bum on the seat. I'm aware of the kind of resonance in my throat. You know, it's just this constant. It's an alive thing. It's not like I'm now embodied. I think embodiment is a practice.
So it's a practice. And you call
absolutely, Absolutely, it's a practice. I think it's something. It's a practice and it's an awareness. It's both those things. So you're practicing the awareness of being here.
And
I mean, that sounds really simplistic, but it is kind of simple in a way, because a lot of the time we're not present to the moment.
And even in mindfulness practices, it's mindful, but it can also become quite an intellectual practice. It doesn't necessarily go into the cells. There's not necessarily a lived experience of, as you're just saying, the feet on the floor, hand on.
I think that's changing massively, actually. I think the whole culture in meditation has really, really changed. I think it's much more body centered. A lot more, I think, because I think it's like all of these things. I think embodiment as a word is on trend, because the state of the planet and what's happening, we've had to become so disengaged, so separated from the physical, to be the planet, to be in the state that it is. So of course, I think embodiment is really on trend, because the more sensitive we become, the more sensitized we become, we start to feel our experience, then you feel the world around you, and that really changes how we live our moment by moment interactions, and how we relate to life really shifts and changes. You know, I think it's really important we become sensitive. I would say that's right at the heart of right now, where I feel alive and passionate in what I want to offer, is that we have to remember our sensitive design. It's through sensing our way through life that we'll understand what to do next, not through thinking what do we do next. We have to come to a sort of more fundamental,
the feminine path, the Venus path, in a way, the reconnection to the physical world as well. I mean, we've had the transcendental practices for so long, where you meditate and the body is this thing to be transcended, and it's this meat. The lot of the traditional meditation, they would refer to the body as a meat sack or a fleshy thing to be transcended, and it led to a lot of spiritual bypassing, and
I think it's the marriage of both, to tell you the truth. I really feel it's like, this is our time to make the physical realm, is to make the physical realm sacred, so we see the sacredness in everything. So being in my body, I stop objectifying it. And I mean, you just look at how I think about consumerism. We've really had to come so far away from ourselves to talk about ourselves as a product that people can make money out of. And I think once you see other human beings as sacred, the earth is sacred, the trees sacred, the birds sacred, the water sacred, the air sacred, you start returning the transcendental into the physical. I think for me, that's where it really, really is happening. I think we would live very differently if we started to recognize the sacred in our physical reality, this physical reality called life that we're having.
Because on your website you call it embodied awakening, and towards receiving the nuanced information that naturally arises, which brings us back to this thawing. I would call it a thawing of the senses.
Oh, I love that.
So
that's really nice.
It's because it is this, we've been numbed from trauma, from war, from ancestral pain, and it's not to judge the mind for being the mind, but it's to see that we had to develop it like that because that's, well, it was an evolutionary part of our path. But now it's that thawing, and I don't think you can come in woomph. It's just gently bringing all those frozen parts back home to the heart, and they'll naturally melt, and by melting then that melding, as you're talking about, will happen, won't it?
And I think it's like, I love that. I like this thawing. I might have to steal that one. And it's putting, because to remain sensitive, that's the thing. We can have these moments of coming back to our sensitivity, and it's very easy then to build up all that armoring and numbing again, because you go, oh my God, now I'm feeling all this stuff. And that's what's my bandwidth to feel all of this, so something, I think we thaw out a bit, and then we can get a bit rigid again, and then we thaw out a bit more, and our capacity to feel more becomes a bit more extensive, and then we go, oh, that's my edge, I need to put up my buffering. And I think there's this kind of contracting and expanding, contracting, expanding. I don't think any of these things, it's not like now I feel.
No.
and it's having environments. I know you're going to come on to this about safety, but having an environment where somewhere, when I say normalizing, that it's received as if it's a very natural way to be, to feel. I think it's really important, that affirmation, to be in a space where people aren't freaking out by that. The people around you are really open and grounded, and it's received in a very natural way. And then you start to go, oh, actually this is all right. It's painful, it moves, and suddenly I feel more. For me, it's that I feel more able to be here and receive myself and receive the world in a more natural state. So it's an ongoing process. The thawing process is an ongoing, I think.
So how would a session with you look like? I mean, I know you've just been doing a retreat in Hungary, working with people. So can you share what exactly a session with you might be, or different things you offer? Because I know you've been having some time out to reassess and change how perhaps you offer the work you do.
That's a really, really big question.
Okay,
but I would say,
What did you do in Hungary?
In Hungary, it was a 5-day workshop. So, and it's the title that you like, Where Spirit Meets the Bone. And I was the real focus in the 5 days was grounding people in their felt experience. And it's very easy, I think, especially when you have a room, especially in the form of what I offer, which is free form movement, is you're in a group, and there are individuals who their natural place is to be in relationship the whole time. And when they get into relationship, like we all do, we have patterns. And the same thing happens on the dance floor. There's these habits and patterns that you see get played out on the dance floor. Or you might have an individual who finds it very hard to connect in relationship. So they'll be in their own space, doing the safety of their own patterns.
So what exactly might that look like? Because I know you used to train, or you did train as a 5 rhythms.
I did.
Teacher, but is what you're offering might look like something similar to that, where it's
Yes, in the form that it's free form movement, and know in the fact that the five rhythms has these five particular kind of archetypal rhythmical rhythms that go through a particular form, and yeah, it has you go from flowing staccato, chaos, lyrical stillness, and this is called a wave. And I'm not offering that anymore at all. But where it might look similar is that people are moving from an inner experience and creating their own movements and their own sort of movement language from something they're feeling from the inside. So that there might be similarities in terms of looking at a room, seeing people, they're not learning steps.
Mm-hmm. My question leading on was from your comment that you could see on the dance floor that people were dancing their patterns.
Yes.
Repeatedly.
Yes.
So could you explain what that would be exactly, what you saw in that?
Well, that might be multiple. So if it's a sort of, say, for example, they might have discovered they have shoulders, elbows, and hands. So they're almost like they're just in the arms, and their eyes look down at the floor continually, and they like to go forwards and backwards. Okay, so I'm sorry, this is a very crude demonstration. But the feet might not move off the ground.
Right.
They might not know that there's space to the sides. They might not realize that the eyes can take up the space of above them, or that we're spatial beings, that we have all this capacity, and maybe we only use like 5% of that in our movement. So that kind of pattern in how we inhabit space. So you might or you might have somebody who always in relationship, they move too far into somebody else's physical space. Right. Or they don't listen to maybe some of the sort of subtle body language that someone is giving out. So they're constantly breaking a sort of boundary. So there's all these patterns. They're constantly, you see it, in the position I'm in where I'm sitting back at the space, you see it all the time. All different types of patterns happening in the space. So sort of going back to where we would begin in the workshop, and I really grounded the workshop in this, is really to come in and first of all meet the principles of grounding and centering. Those two sort of fundamentals of kind of going, are you here on the ground? How do you experience that where you're not looking at the ground, but you're feeling the ground through your feet? And how does the ground move? How are you a moving being who has a sense of the ground, has a sense of the earth in movement? So, there's so many multiple ways you'll be exploring that. And then the same with centering, and centering to being grounded and centered at the same time. And then we're moving to really, really subtle sort of nuanced places of, you say, your skeleton moving through space. How do you explore? And we imagine the skeleton from the ground through the center, and then there's so many different exercises I have in my bag for exploring space, where you might work in a 2 and someone has their eyes closed, and I work with touch, very simple, clear touch, as a way to help a person have a greater sense of their inner felt experience and its possibility to move in space. And there's something that happens to our brain and our experience when we start to explore in this way, because it really changes the way we start to feel our experience. It's very subtle, and it's a very different way of suddenly receiving yourself. when you're outside of your patterns.
Mm.
Because I mean, I'm not going to be very articulate about neuroscience, but for sure, when you do the same thing over and over, apparently we get very strong grooves in the brain, and it's a well executed path. That generally, when we do something that is a habit, we bring less presence to what we're doing because it's more automated. So when you bring people into a sense of kind of exploring a sense of their own space and how they inhabit space in new ways, we don't know that yet. And that does something very different to our physiology and our experience of our physiology. Mm-hmm. And you see it, for me, it's very exciting because people become super present. They're really alive in their experience because they don't really know what they're doing. If that makes sense.
Yes, yes.
It's the real element of improvisation and kind of co-creating with the sort of, I'm going to say, cosmic flow of the universe moving through us. You know, you start to kind of be in the moment of that becoming experience.
Mm. Would it take quite a lot of time for your participants to get to that space of trust in order to allow themselves to move in that, you know, is there like different stages that perhaps a group which had been quite contracted or had a lot of trauma to work with, or I suppose I'm imagining that you would just feel what the level was with that group and give them the exercises accordingly.
Do you know what? I would say I don't necessarily do that.
Oh, right, okay.
In the fact that I try to use very, very simple exercises that give an individual a felt experience that they can then explore at the level that they can explore it. Right. And I wouldn't even use the word safety there because
funny one, isn't it? It's another one.
Because it is really in the pool, and I think we could get very intellectual about safety, but I think safety is something we feel. It's not something we think. So, you know, for myself personally, if I walk into a space or a situation, my body tells me I feel safe or doesn't feel safe, and that's the intelligence that I need to respond to. So if I walk into a situation and it's like my solar plexus starts going, something in me starts feeling really like I can't breathe, and there's a sort of withdrawing energy. If I'm intelligent, I'll probably just walk out of that situation and go, this isn't a good situation for me to be in. And I don't override what my body is telling me. And the same when a situation feels good. My body knows it. I feel relaxed. I'm smiling. I want to move towards things. I like the sense of the feeling of the people in the room. And I think it's the same with a situation like a workshop or how a space is being held, facilitated. I think it has been for me anyway. I know when someone's asking me something that I don't feel okay to do. Mm-hmm. They generally don't give me choice, and there isn't an adaptation to what I'm being asked. And I think it's really important that you always put an adaptation into what you ask people. So so going back to what I was saying, I will choose something. I use very simple exercises to give an experience, and I will give. So if I'm using touch, for example, I will say you don't have to have touch. And I will give an adaptation of the same exercise where there doesn't have to be touch. So the person all the time can choose where they want to explore it from. And the same with touch. I'm so clear how that has to be, what it is and what it isn't. And the person who's being touched, you're always giving them the power to say how it is and how it isn't. And actually, if you have had any kind of trauma where that power has been taken away from an individual. I think some of the repairing and restorative work is when a person finds their voice again, in you know, without ever naming it, in really tiny little ways, to someone to go, I feel uncomfortable, and now I'm going to say I feel uncomfortable, and they have an opportunity to do that. It's like, it's going back to that thing of practice, and the more we practice these things, because it will feel uncomfortable sometimes to say, I don't like that, sorry, can you stop? You know, it can be a really big deal to name these things. And actually, I think that's where the kind of workshop environment or these things are really great, because people can practice this stuff. So safety has to be there, but not to the point of never letting people have an experience where they can restore some of their self-authority, you know, which is really important, that we sort of gain some of that self-authority and agency.
In Hungary, I know you mentioned earlier that the different countries you've taught in have often like different archetypal patterns they're working with. Could you share something that you told me about how you had to be quite firm with the men in that? Was it Hungary? Was that a different?
No, there is Hungary. Yeah, I wouldn't call it archetypal patterns. I will say they're cultural. Yeah, not archetypal. And what is really, I've worked in Hungary several times, and I would say initiating agency, as in they often wait for the teacher to, now we begin, or I'm waiting for you to tell me what I've got to do. And so I really wanted to work with this idea of, how do you give enough tools? And then you say, now you discover and apply these tools to your own inquiry without waiting for me. But it's a really tough one, because you're coming from cultures where they've had really strong dictatorship. It's a culture where you don't trust or feel you can act on your own impulses. It's deep, deep conditioning. And then I would say, in terms of between the men and women, it's very polarized. You know, for the men, it's definitely not so easy to express the feminine energy. And for women, it's not very easy to express the more masculine principle in you know, so it's very polarized how you see it in the room.
For people who perhaps aren't aware of what would be an expression of masculine energy or feminine energy, could you?
Okay, and not to generalize that, I'm going to be more specific then.
It's not gender specific, it's
no. I would say I would say, in terms of with the men, to be receptive and I'm going to use the word vulnerable and fluid, and is definitely more difficult to express, because now I will mention the word safety. I don't think it hasn't felt safe to express those things. It's not that they're not there, it's just that it hasn't been safe. And then I think the same for women, to express maybe your authority, your boundaries, to take clear action. It's not safe to express that. So it's not that these things aren't there, it's about the context of it culturally being expressed in the culture, and then it being safe to express that in a room.
How would that compare, say, teaching in Hungary to, I mean, where else have you taught?
I've taught in Russia, I've taught in the Ukraine, I've taught a lot in France, I've taught in Switzerland, I've taught in Portugal.
So are there, you were saying, cultural patterns, big differences from the example you just shared about Hungary?
Yeah.
Can you give us another couple of examples of.
Oh, so in France, men do not have a problem to express the feminine. I mean, there's stuff that gets played out between men and women. It's a self-conscious, as in being beautiful, and in French culture, it's that to both the men and women are being very, very self-conscious in their presentation at first, culturally. I think that's very in the surface, especially in Paris. But in the Latin culture, I think the feminine is very celebrated by men. Men, and you see it in their bodies, they're very comfortable to express their hips, and they're more expressive in a more fluid way in their bodies. They love food, and they wear colour. It's different, it's different. I think things like the emotional bandwidth is different in Latin culture. Men do cry, and men do express love and beauty. It's normalized in the culture. So
where does Britain
okay.
fit in on this?
No, yeah,
cultural...
no. I think that it's definitely less in terms of feminine in that way, but not the same as Hungary. There's I think there's more of an equality of the masculine, feminine in men and women in the UK. There's different things that aren't expressed.
Such as?
Well, I would say, in sort of going, and this isn't a judgment of positive, I think this is a preference or not preference. I want to be really, really clear here. So say in a culture like France, the seduction element is very strong. So going back to when I was saying describing the relational space, it's very normalized to sort of penetrate the boundaries of between men and women, or men and men, and women and women, seduction, full stop, and so if you a learning edge in France would be how to pull back on that. Right. Somewhere. How do you listen? Who are you if you're not in seduction? Because a lot of that's identity stuff, it's a cultural identity. And I would, in the UK, that isn't such a normalized thing between men and women. There's sort of politeness. Eye contact's really, really different. Which parts of the body are more expressed when they come into relationship, to say which parts of the body expressed in France, and I would even also say the shape of the body is manifested through culture. I remember when I first sort of taught in places like Russia and the Ukraine, the physical shape of the man was so different to, say, the physical shape of, say, a French man. I think because of what is allowed to have been expressed in the culture. So that shapes us. It physically actually shapes us. Because if you think about the behaviors of how you live through your life, is forming our physical form all the time. So I would say even the physical shape of the men was so different. And seeing a man walk across a space, which part of the body's engaged and which part of the body isn't engaged. What part of the body is expressing itself, what part of the body isn't expressing itself.
Have you taught in America at all?
I haven't, no.
Or Japan?
It's a long way away. No.
Interesting to compare.
Yeah, and China and countries like that, I think, would be really fascinating. I would imagine with China, similar to any countries where you've had sort of dictatorship, that the teacher is like the power. So to put the power back in the center of someone, which I think is really, really important. This sort of sense of agency, self-authority in the body, means you have to come back into your own center. And to be able to listen and say, this is what's moving in me, this is how it feels. That's the journey back, I think. Yeah, so I think we've sort of deviated quite a bit there, but going back to what might happen. So in terms of the journey over, say, depending whether it's a class, a weekend workshop, a 5-day retreat, is we're really rooting and grounding in the bringing the aliveness back in, that interior space, that intimate space. And when we're really grounded in that, like when we know to come back in, I mean, we're always in there, but how we bring that awareness. So if I say, really bring your attention back into the feet, that you know how to bring your attention back into the feet. It's not just an idea, it's a lived experience. Or you say, bring it back into the center, back into the home of your center place. But again, you know where your center is. So once, you know, we've really explored over a few days, really that interior connection, that relationship to the self, then the sort of next exploration and invitation is how we open to life. We open to this moving, changing, ever evolving experience that we say, we use the word outer. I like to say we're opening to kind of taking in more of what life is about. And then it's about how we play inside that experience, and that's the sort of co-creative space, how we stay really present and grounded in the inner life of our experience, how we open to the outer experience, and then the dance of what lives in that play of those spaces. So that's the sort of ultimate kind of inquiry, and in that, say, in a workshop space, it will look like dance and movement, and improvised dance and movement.
Have you got a like a little snippet of something you can demonstrate to us here now for people to take away with them, so that they can put a little bit of that into practice?
Okay, so we will have a little play here then. So we'll just do something very simple. This isn't necessarily what I would do in a workshop, because we wouldn't be sitting down necessarily.
Something people
We'd
can
be standing.
try.
But I think it's more to place it in what I mean from interior to kind of opening. So just closing your eyes and bringing your attention inside. So I'm gonna do it so you can see. So I'm bringing my attention inside. And so I'm just bringing my attention to where my bottom is sitting in the cushion. I allow my bottom just to soften and relax a little more into the cushion. So there's this sense of just dropping my weight, my physical weight, a little more into the ground through my bottom. So if you were standing, you could be doing this from standing, and you can just be softening the knees, having the sense of the feet and the soles of the feet on the ground, and through your pelvis, just dropping your weight into the earth, into the ground. So I'm going to stay with me sitting here, just so I'm connected to my own felt experience. And then in my belly, just see if I can offer a little more space in my belly, in my pelvis. And again, just really allowing that to drop a little more into ground. So I'm doing this a little faster than I would do naturally. And then I'm going to bring my attention into my spine. And with the tail of my spine just kind of dropping into ground. And then through my spine, through the neck and through the skull, through the top of my head, having this feeling of a gentle kind of growing through the spine. So there's this sense that my belly, my legs, my bottom are really grounding, rooting into the ground. And then through the spine, there's this opposite direction of kind of growing, like you see a little shoot, little plant shoot growing through the earth, growing just up. And then the shoulders just naturally relaxing. Moving through the arms, just relaxing. And then just having a sense of my heart space. So that interoceptive space of, can I feel into my physical heart? Can I feel any sense of heartbeat? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Just feeling into that space. So again, I'm doing this a little quicker than I would. And then just having a sense of your left palm and just have it turned upwards. And having a sense of the ends of your fingers and the space between your fingers. Staying connected to where your bottom or your feet touch the ground. Checking in with your belly. Staying connected with that sense of your inner spine, growing up. And then really again tuning into the physical heart, but maybe also the feeling and emotional heart. And if you could place your heart into the palm of your hand, just begin to let the hand, the fingers, through the arm, begin to explore the feeling of the heart. In all the beautiful empty space. As if it's floating, the shoulders, the elbows, the wrists, the fingers. Is moving in this beautiful floating space. And it's talking, or it's expressing, or trying to express the feeling in the heart. And we'll just play with this for a minute or two. And have at points just drop into that attention of your bottom on the ground or your feet on the ground, that sense of your spine. So you feel the interiority of your form moving, the energy moving through your body, and playing with the rhythm. Maybe the heart wants to express something a little stronger or really soft. So you're feeling the qualities of that. So when you feel really connected to this, so we're moving along here, just opening the eyes. So how with the eyes open, maybe just look what's in your space. And at the same time, staying inside the feeling of the body. So often when we open our eyes, we lose that connection to this beautiful feeling experience. And we might lose connection to the feeling of our heart, or we might lose connection to our center or our ground. And then you might want to take your eyes right out. So I've got a beautiful oak tree to the left of me. And so I'm just opening now, and maybe my movement of my arm is relating to the oak tree, and there's a relationship being formed. And then maybe taking up more of the space. So we're looking at the space with the eyes, taking in more what's around, which brings in more of the body. So it can just build like that. So, and then you'll notice that sometimes we get really out and we don't know what's going on in, and we want to ground it a bit in, or we get so in, we don't know what's out. So, this is just a really simplified way to explain what I mean by an interior and sort of opening to an exterior place. And then you have the elements, you bring music in, or you work with just a partner, or maybe then you work with 4 people. And all of these are like layers to bring a little more complexity to an experience.
Even with just that example, that you can feel the stillness moving, you can feel this, the transmission of it.
So it's very simple. It really isn't. I actually think sometimes it's about stripping back so we meet ourselves, and that's it. So we meet ourselves, and we have our own experience, and it's not somebody else's experience. Our own experience, it's our own movement, it's our own dance. And then how that comes into life, to come into union with life, some kind of unity with life. So then it becomes a co-created dance. I was on a little walk this morning, and I was thinking of I was thinking about conformity and unity. And conformity being this experience that a lot of our energy is thinking, how do I adapt to fit in? And in conformity, we're often really abandoning anything original or really truthful that lives inside of us. And I think unity is really different. I think unity kind of wants our unique flavor. Yeah, it wants our unique expression. It needs us to really connect. And I think proper unified fields or unity experiences, it's really it's not about conforming. It's not it might be that people may be doing the same thing, or they might be moving within the same thing, but they're really connected to their own source, their own connection to an experience.
And I think the past 2 years, and it's probably happening again, we've really witnessed the different, where behavior to conform to an external authority was
Yeah.
put on us. And many people would believe that, well, it's for the good of everybody, but actually not quite seeing that if it wasn't coming from a direct response to what was being called
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
the external eyes, you could have 3 people doing the same thing, 2 of
Yeah.
them maybe doing it through conformity and only one of them doing it as an expression of what was moving through them. But to somebody looking, they
Absolutely.
could be doing the same thing. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important, as you're saying, when people
Yeah.
reconnect to their
Yeah.
own authority,
Yeah.
they'll know, maybe right for you, but it sure ain't right for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And respecting people's rights to make that in, what's right for them. You can't ever take that or say it should be different.
No. Well, because I think we're threatened by difference.
Mm.
And we've lost the kind of I think, to stay curious and open is a very different way of meeting the world.
Is there anything you'd like to tell people who are listening, like share, or if there's one nugget of wisdom you'd like to share with us, or to take home, what would that be? Take with them?
Oh, that's nice. I think that I don't know whether it's a wisdom, but I think it's an intentional prayer or wish that I hope for certainly for myself, but also for humanity is that to be in the body is a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful experience to be in form, and we can really focus on the trauma. We were taught. I know this is a little bit the subject matter of your interviews, but I really feel there's these opportunities to restore us to a place of the design beyond pain is a wonderful thing to be embodied, to be in a body, and to discover what it is to be in a body. We just within our design, we have all these incredible capacities to feel pleasure, to feel play, to feel reconnect to our inner sense and innocence. So anything that moves you in that direction, pay attention and give it more space. Make time for it. That's what I would say. Because it's a little bit like, what do you want to feed? I think the more you give space to that, it does grow. Mm. It does grow. And coming to this place of where we talk about safety, we find safety in ourselves. We start to trust ourselves, and we start to trust our principal relationship with life. And it's not something we find outside. It's something we feel from the inside. And so, yeah, any way that you can build on that, and little and often, keep practicing in really ordinary ways. It doesn't have to be epic, or you don't have to make a huge amount of space. You can just do it in really simple ways every day, and trust that the body wants to come back to balance and its natural state. It's built into us.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Dance and more dance.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Emma, for talking to me today. And I know if anyone wants to get in touch, I shall put the details of your website in the description.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.